Shalom, this is Rabbi Jonathan Ginsburg of the Ezra Habanim Niles Township Jewish Congregation. This video is about how we welcome babies into the world. First of all, we don't consider babies to be needing to get rid of sin. Like other religious traditions, we believe babies are born with a pure soul. All we want to do is to welcome them into the covenant of Abraham and Sarah. Now for a boy, of course, that goes to biblical origins of circumcision. And every once in a while, some group says circumcision is not necessary or medically indicated, or some anti-Semitic group will be specifically vicious about it. But more and more, the evidence is that God knew what God was doing when asked for there to be circumcision. For example, they just did a study of AIDS prevention in Africa, and the study was so conclusive they stopped it in the middle of the study because circumcised men have much, much more resistance to HIV than uncircumcised men. It's just one example in prevention of certain kinds of cancer in women. In any case, we don't do it for medical reasons, we do it for religious reasons. God ordained that on the 8th day, every Jewish male should be circumcised, as Isaac was, the first Jewish baby. And that's usually done by a moil, somebody who's specially prepared and trained to do this. In smaller communities, often a Jewish doctor will take that role. And the conservative movement has special training programs to train physicians on how to do this. The circumcision ceremony is called Brit Milah. People know it as a Bris, but Bris is the Ashkenazic way of saying Brit, and that simply means covenant. The critical word really is Milah, which is the circumcision. It's always on the 8th day, including the day of birth. So if it's a Monday, it's a Monday, and we never ever prevent it or do anything to not be on the 8th day, even if it's Shabbat or Yom Kippur or Rosh Hashanah. Only if there's a medical reason can you delay it. And what happens? You invite anybody you want, or traditionally people aren't really invited, they just show up, but nowadays people are invited. You need to get the moil. If you have a rabbi, it's good to have the rabbi there if possible. And the ceremony consists of two parts. First, the kvater and kvaterin, the spiritual godparents, bring the baby in. You welcome the baby, and then the moil will prepare the baby, and a good moil will do it very quickly. The parents have to be authorizing the moil to fulfill the mitzvah because otherwise it falls on the father. There's a bracha the moil says. There's a bracha the parents say to welcome the baby into the covenant. And then everybody says, Kashem shenichnas lebrit, kein yikanesh letorah, chuppah amasin tovim. Just as this baby has been entered into the covenant, so may the baby be entered into a life of Torah, of chuppah, the wedding canopy, and good deeds. And then the second half is the naming. And the couple in the Ashkenazic tradition usually name the baby after a deceased relative. In the Sephardic community, usually after a living relative. The Hebrew name, Ben or Bat, for a Bris, it's of course a Ben, a son of the parents, Hebrew names. Now, if the mother isn't Jewish, the baby will need to be circumcised for the purposes of conversion and go to a mikveh later. And the moil can actually do that by just adding a word or two. In addition, because it's a medical procedure, there's a Mishaberach healing prayer done usually by the moil. One thing that happens that's interesting at the beginning of the bris ceremony is a special chair is designated for Elijah the prophet, the guardian of little babies, called Kisei Shel Eliyahu, the chair of Elijah, and a special prayer is made. There is a person who holds the baby, or nowadays the baby's usually put on a certain restraining device so that the person holding the baby actually just puts their hands over their head, and that's the sandak, usually one of the grandfathers. And yes, many moyalim will use a topical anesthetic to dull the pain, although there really isn't very much pain. Babies just don't like to be fussed with. Now, in the naming ceremony, after the name is given, there's a blessing with a cup of wine to do it, and the parents can often feel free to speak about why they named the baby what they did. The ceremony then concludes with the priestly benediction, and singing and rejoicing, and of course, food, the Sudat mitzvah. Now, for girls, the tradition was in the Ashkenazic world, the European Jewish world, that the father would come to the synagogue when the Torah was read and recite an aliyah, and the baby's name would be mentioned then. But about 2 generations ago, Jewish couples, mostly outside of Orthodoxy, began to feel that that wasn't enough and there should be more for a girl. And so a tradition has developed of naming ceremonies, Simchat Bat, not necessarily done on the 8th day, but it's very unusual. My daughter's now 21, and when she was born, it was very unusual to do these, and we had a filmmaker come and film the baby naming, and it actually played at the Amsterdam Jewish Museum for a while, 21 years ago. In any case, there's really no set liturgy. We try and follow the format of the covenanting and the naming. For example, when a couple comes to me for a baby naming, I send them an email version, and they're very free to change it the way they like. And singing, and of course celebration. So I hope that explains the basics of Jewish naming and covenanting. Please consult your rabbi for more detailed information.